Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, everybody. Hello, everyone. This is Lori Smith on Blog Talk Radio. Had a bit of trouble getting into my switchboard, and I'm here. I'm a few minutes late. And this is child abuse prevention, and human rights abuse prevention is up to us. I'm just opening up the chat room now, and we are looking at an article. It's called Child Abuse. It's from familyviolence.alberta.ca. You can find that at www.familyviolence.alberta.ca. We started this article on Sunday morning, and it's a great article regarding family violence and the issues surrounding family violence, especially child abuse. And so I'm glad that you can be here. This is normally a 30-minute show, and it's live streaming internet radio broadcast from blogtalkradio.com. And so it's not I'm not a professional. I don't have any certificates in counseling or therapist certificates. I'm just a person who does my own Blog Talk Radio shows because I really think the issues of child abuse are really not talked about enough. There is a lot of voices out there, and thank God. And I just want to be one more voice to add to everyone else's voice, just to say, that we need to stop child abuse. Stop child abuse. We need to find ways to prevent it and work with our own communities, our own homes, to stop child abuse and human rights abuses as well, right? So, I just thought I'd just be one more voice and just join everybody else and start talking about it. And, sadly, really the only thing we ever really hear about child abuse is when it's too late and a child's been murdered at the hands of their parents or caregivers, or they're in the hospital due to abuse-related injuries, and that's just too late then, right? So the whole issue is prevention. And so the more education and the more awareness we can promote to get the word out to people about the signs and symptoms, what to look for people that work around children, people who work like teachers and people who work in schools, people who are around children. If they're educated in the signs and symptoms of the different types of child abuse, whether it's physical, emotional, psychological, sexual, right? Then they're more apt to know what to look for and spot these abused children, right? Because abused children have no voice, quite often cannot stand up for themselves, and most of the time, right, they can't stand up for themselves, and so we have to be, on a lookout, right? And then we have to know how to report it properly. It's just so important, because if you don't report child abuse properly, the child can end up back in the home and just be killed, or the abuse just continues on. So it's just so important to know how to report child abuse, and you can get all this information on the web. Lots and lots of great websites that do have that information. Tonight we're actually looking at an article from www.familyviolence.alberta.ca, so we'll continue on with that. And we were looking over just the beginning of it on Sunday morning, and how violence in the home affects children, types of abuse, neglect, emotional injury, physical abuse, and sexual abuse, and whatnot. So there's the different types of abuse, so you can go back and check that out. I'm not going to reread that. But we left off with the beginning part of the types of abuse. And now we're going to look at two concepts. And there's two concepts. It is useful to understand the legal definitions and of abuse. It is even more important to understand these two concepts. Number one, different forms of abuse tend to cluster together. For example, emotional abuse usually comes first and is part of other forms of abuse. Neglect, emotional abuse, and physical abuse are often present in the same home. At least one other form of abuse usually goes along with sexual abuse. In any case, sexual abuse has profound emotional impacts on children and youth. So that's just the case there. And I know, in my home there was a lot of verbal abuse, a lot of emotional abuse, as well as physical abuse. And in my case, there was some sexual abuse as well. And so, this is just a thing. It was multi-layered, right? And there was a lot of domestic violence and just a lot of violence in the home. So, that's just the whole issue. It all kind of goes together. It's sadly, quite often more than just one type of abuse, right? And it says conditions that increase the risk of child abuse. Child abuse can happen in any home, at any income level, and in any culture. However, some circumstances make child neglect and abuse more likely. The three most common circumstances in which up in an abusive home and or witnessed abuse as children. Parents or guardians have substance abuse or other addiction problems. Parents or guardians are under enormous personal stress because of poverty, unemployment, health problems, emotional or mental illness, relationship difficulties, adjusting to life in a new country, or a crisis in their lives. And so that's a condition that would increase the risk of child abuse. And just to throw this in, growing up in an abusive home, that was pretty much the case in my case, right? My mother was abused as a child. She witnessed a lot of abuse in her home. My grandmother was a very abusive woman, and her father was very passive and just kind of hid from my grandmother, I guess. My grandfather, I never met him, but I only met my grandmother a couple times, and she was a very abusive woman. I just didn't like to be around her. But my parents were under a lot of stress, personal stress. They had their own emotional issues they were going through. There was we were not poverty level. We were low income, just a few dollars over the poverty line. And so, because my parents had 7 children, and so the stress was there. They had a lot of health problems. My mom did. My dad worked and stuff, and he had a little bit of mental illness going on, some borderline schizophrenia. And my mom was diagnosed manic depressive. So the two of them had their own emotional and mental illness problems. They had relationship difficulties. They were not getting along. My dad was accusing my mom of sleeping around, and my mom had these 7 kids by him, but he insisted that none of us were his. This type of thing, right? So it caused my mom a lot of stress. She in turn abused me, and this is what happens, right? I was born out of marital rape, and this is the kind of thing that can happen in a family. It's unfortunate. People don't like to look at the truth, but the truth hurts, and it's sad to say. But so many people have suffered from this kind of stuff. It's really horrible. It's horrific, and really there has to be better systems, better ways to help parents who are having a hard time so that they don't abuse their children when they are in these types of situations, right? And also adjusting to life in a new country, which my parents did, but they moved from Canada down to the United States and didn't know anybody down there. They just picked up and moved with these 6 kids and in a van with all their stuff, and they had so many problems. Had they been a close couple, it would have probably worked out, but they were not a close couple, and they fought quite often, and they had a real dislike for each other, let's just say. I would say hatred is more the word. And they continually battered each other and just made life miserable for each other. So this is the kind of stuff that increases the risk of child abuse, and it certainly did, and it certainly happened. There was an intervention done when I was a toddler, and we were not removed from the home. We should have been. Sadly, we weren't, and so no one got any help, and and the abuse just continued on. So it was quite sad, but very true. It does happen, and it's this is the kind of stuff that can cause it. Personal stress. Parents have substance abuse or addiction problems. Parents or guardians grew up in abusive homes, right? This is the kind of thing that will sort of increase the risk of child abuse, and we need to find ways to prevent this, because we see these reports in the paper that most of these people who are reportedly abusing their children have either substance abuse or other addiction problems, or they have mental issues, quite often emotional issues, anger issues. They can't handle their anger. They have poor parenting skills, and these people are popping out kids left and right, and these kids are paying the price for it. So somewhere, somehow, something has to happen to stop this from happening, because we could save children's lives, right, if we could just find a way to make this work, right? It says 2 other circumstances with a risk of child abuse and neglect are when a parent or guardian sees the children as objects or possessions, and also a parent or guardian does not understand normal child behavior or healthy child development. So that's the whole thing. People think that it's okay just to pop out a child. You don't have to have any skills. You don't have to know anything about parenting. There's parenting classes out there. There's parenting magazines, child magazines that are online. They're free, and you can get parenting tips on how to to help you, right? Because it's obviously a stressful time. time in everyone's life, and especially when the child becomes a toddler, they start running around getting into everything, and the babies are crying and cranky. It can really, after a long day, it can get on your. I'm not a parent, but I've seen this with other people's children, right? And I see the stress involved with these people, and there is support out there. That's just the whole issue. You don't have to do it alone. Back in the old days when there wasn't any support, people did have to pretty much go it alone. But nowadays, that's just not the case. There's help out there for people. There's help out there for these parents who are having problems, and they don't need to abuse their children. So that's just the whole issue. And, if we can just get enough people really it's just all about promoting education and awareness, to stop and prevent child abuse. And they said here, it is obvious that children or youth are more at risk of abuse when they live with adults who have many personal problems. Helping children and youth directly, as well as helping their families, can benefit everyone. And the next part of this article, you can read it right along here. I'll just give you the website again, www.familyviolence.alberta.ca, ALBERTA, alberta.ca. And the next portion is how abuse, neglect, and exposure to violence affect children. The threat of abuse affects children's brain development. Brain scans show that children in abusive environments use much of their brain to watch out for danger. Less of their brain is available for healthy growth and development. It affects their physical, emotional, and mental development. It affects their ability to form healthy relationships. It affects the child even when the child is not consciously aware of the violence in the home. So it definitely has an effect on the child's mental development because they are spending way more time looking out for danger and looking out for it just in fear than they are in growing and developing healthy, right? So this is the thing. It's very, very hard on children. All children in a threatening environment are affected by fear. They may feel anxious or panicky, have an increased heart rate. Babies in violent or angry homes have faster heart rates even in their sleep. Be very watchful and attentive all the time, as though on red alert. That's how I was. I spent my whole childhood being very much on the alert because I never knew what was going to be happening in the home, and it was very stressful. And I always had to be kind of on the lookout for my moods for my parents, like what kind of mood they were in, and if they were in a bad mood, stay right away from them. And if they seemed to be quiet and peaceful, well then, I knew it was cool to be around. So I spent a lot of time concerned about what everybody else was doing, and not much time concerned about what I was doing or thinking about. So it really had a direct effect on me, absolutely. It says here, because their brains are distracted by fear, the children may find it hard to concentrate or pay attention, have difficulty sleeping, have difficulty learning, because they're distracted by fear. So they can't concentrate, they have a hard time sleeping, and then of course they can't concentrate because they're not sleeping well, and then of course they can't learn much, right? So it's just a huge problem, and we really have to stop this for children today, right? Children in a threatening environment use different ways to cope. Some children react by becoming more aggressive. They may be defiant, act impulsive, have angry outbursts, act bossy or pushy, bully or hurt others. Sometimes these loud children do not appear to be affected. They look like they feel confident and in charge, but their aggressive behaviors grow out of fear expressed outwardly as anger. Some children react by becoming quiet and withdrawn. They may try to stay safe by becoming invisible, go into their own fantasy world and tune out the world around them, be more obedient or passive than other children, be numb and disconnected from their own feelings, be detached from other people, have a hard time getting along with others, or be depressed. And it says sometimes these quiet children do not seem to be affected by what is going on around them. They do not seem to react. However, this unaffected appearance is a danger sign. In the face of fear and feeling helpless to affect what is going on, they have disconnected from their environment. As long as children live in a threatening or abusive environment, the trauma will continue to affect their brains, and they will not be able to heal. The brains, that's what they're saying. It's so hard on people. I know. I spent, my whole family spent year after year after year in this abusive, explosive, violent home. And it's taken me years and years and years to get over it. And that's what it takes, right? It takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of time. And you really have to be very proactive. And just within the last 3 years, I have come so far, really, in my healing, and it hasn't been all that long. And it took me, to the age of 40 to start to begin really healing from all this. And I'm still working on a few things, but mostly I feel pretty good these days. But it was a long, hard haul, and I was at times not sure if I would make it. That's why I always, on my shows, I always say just keep hanging in there. If you're a survivor of child abuse and you've experienced child abuse and you're now an adult survivor just trying to deal with it, I would say just keep reaching out. Just reach out. Find someone to talk to. There's great groups online, like there's child abuse survivor groups that you can belong to. I actually belong to 2 of them, and they're great because you can go on there and make some friends and meet people who have experienced horrific things like yourself, or even close to, somewhat similar to what you've experienced, right? And so they know the type of pain and how hard it is to get through it, to walk through it, and as an adult, the things that we have to deal with. So they're always kind of rooting for you to be well and just wishing people well, and they have resources. They tend to have books and resources that they know about that were very helpful. It's just such a great thing, and I finally joined up probably about 7 months ago in a couple of groups, and I made some excellent, awesome, most wonderful friends in these groups, and they're rooting for me and I'm rooting for them, and we're just trying to support each other and just let each other know that we have to hang in there. We're going to have bad days, but there's going to be good days as well, right? So that's the thing. It's just so important to reach out and get help any way you can, anywhere you can. A therapist, a counselor, someone who you trust, you can reach out to, who you can trust, right? So important to not suffer in silence, right? And it says here, let's see, we'll go ahead and read on here. I wanted to continue. Children in a threatening environment use different ways to cope. This is the next part of this article here. Some children react by becoming more aggressive. They may be, we already went through that. They may be pushy, impulsive, defiant, right? That's what I wanted to talk about. I was like that. I was the one who was more, as a young child, I was very pushy and kind of violent myself, but I was just learning from my mother how to behave, right? Whereas my sister, she was more the withdrawn type, and she actually, she did become invisible. She was never really there, and when she was there, she wasn't there. You know what I mean? She was always just very quiet, out of the way, and she still today is very much like that, very passive, and spends a lot of time by herself. She doesn't do a whole lot of interaction with people or in the community. Period. She's just kind of not necessarily a loner, but she's a quiet type, and she definitely still remains invisible. It's just her. It's the way that she grew up, and that's the way that she handles everything. And it's not that she's not a great person, because she is, but that's how she handled it. That's how she dealt with it. Me, on the other hand, I was out doing drugs and getting into trouble and threatening to beat people up and pushing kids around, and that was just it was a very outward emotional thing for me, whereas for her it was just kind of the opposite. And it's just interesting to see how it affects family members differently, right? And it says here, exposure to violence affects child development. Being in a home where violence happens can cause serious anxiety for children. The earlier they experience anxiety, the more likely it will last and affect their future behavior. Infants and toddlers and preschool children exposed to domestic violence may show the following effects: fear, aggression, withdrawal, and weakened family bonds. And anxiety and fear may limit an infant or toddler's ability to play and explore. Loud noises or images of violence may distress babies and young children. Aggression. Children may learn and copy aggression based on what they see at home. Preschoolers may express anger and other emotions in unhealthy ways by damaging things or hurting other children. And withdrawal. Babies and young children may have no energy or become passive. They may not respond to others and no longer be curious about the sights and sounds around them. Preschoolers may go back to behaviors that are more typical of younger toddlers. And that's the withdrawal. When you see a child doing that, they're withdrawing, right? Weakened family bonds. When parents cannot respond to a child's needs on a regular basis, it weakens the parent-child bond. And preschoolers may become more dependent on caregivers outside the home when their home life is unstable. And it's quite interesting, isn't it? I had a lot of anxiety, I know, when I was young, and I probably still have some. It's probably, maybe some people might not even notice it, but I notice it. And so I'm still working on that, and it's a daily walk, it's a daily process, and we just keep going, right? But it does definitely affect children to grow up in a violent home, in a domestic violent or abusive home, right? And it definitely has weakened family bonds, that's for sure, because our whole family basically fell apart. Everybody was kind of no one really stuck together, and once in a while my brothers would stand up for me, especially when they thought that they saw some abuse going on that they thought they could stop, but on the other hand, they were also abusive themselves. And so, everybody was kind of out to get each other. It was not a very close family. And the only time we ever behaved as a family, it was not even out in public, because at grocery stores or wherever we were, my parents would burst into these fights, and or we'd just be beat up in the parking lot, things like that, but nobody would step in, nobody would say anything, right? And that was just the way it was back then. I grew up in the 60s and early 70s, and lots of people were beating up their kids out in public. It was just the way to do it. Nowadays it's against the law. And so, thank God, we have a little bit more laws going on, but that's why we have to keep going. We have to keep asking for tougher laws. There's better ways than to abuse your children to discipline. You don't need to beat up your children to discipline them. But if you're just a bad parent and don't know how to parent properly, well, then that's not the child's fault, right? So the whole thing is people just need to stop having children who are not prepared and ready to have children. I'm sorry. But it's so true, because who's paying the price? The children, right? And so sad. And so many millions. There's 600. I heard somewhere, I think it was on the Dreamcatchers for Abused Children website, there's 600 million child abuse survivors out there today walking around in North America alone. 600 million. And I mean, really, that just tells you there's 1 in 3 girls, 1 in 6 boys will have been sexually abused before the age of 18. And the statistics are somewhat close as far as child abuse goes. I'm not exactly sure. I don't have them right in front of me. But I'm telling you, if you're in a room of 3 girls or 3 women, 1 of you will have been probably sexually abused as a child under the age of 18. And if you're in a room with 6 or 7 men, 1 of you will have been sexually abused under the age of 18. So that's too many. It's wrong. It has to stop, and it's just crazy. So we really have to, that's why I'm doing this show. I just said, I just thought to myself, I just need to keep speaking. We all need to get a voice. And no matter how we do it, whatever way we can, because it's all, everybody has a different ways of doing things and different talents and gifts, right? So whether it's writing or just getting involved in politics or getting in law, or getting into criminal justice or whatever, as long as we get involved, we can make a difference and really change this for children, right? Hopefully prevent more children from dying, because this is the whole issue. Children and youth have additional reactions. Older children and youth in abusive homes may continue to cope the way they did when they were younger. They may be aggressive and very watchful, or detached and not responsive to their environment. As they get older, they may also have other reactions. I list these off here. Shame and isolation, seeking alternative family, taking on adult responsibilities, substance abuse, running away, and whatnot. We have about just a couple minutes left of the show here. They also go on to talk about how can you tell if a child is being abused. There's clues that a child or young person may be in an abusive environment, and we're going to look at that on Wednesday night. And also Grounds for Hope, what we know about children who grow up with abuse and become healthy adults. And then there is What to Do If a Child Tells You About Abuse. And so this is a great article. I really highly recommend it. And that's www.familyviolence.alberta.ca. And it's called Child Abuse. It says there, it's just an article. It says there is no question. Child abuse. So this is some great information, and I highly recommend anybody who wants to read through it. But we're going to continue on Wednesday night. Now, tomorrow night is Dreamcatchers Talk Radio here on blogtalkradio.com, 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And that's I'm the Canada Regional Director for Dreamcatchers for Abused Children, and I'm so happy to stand with them, let me tell you. We have our own Blog Talk Radio show. It's called Dreamcatchers Talk Radio. It's on Tuesday nights right now, 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for half an hour. But it's going to be expanding in May, and we're going to have all that information out to you. And maybe tomorrow night we'll talk about that. So that's coming up tomorrow night. I hope you can join us live for that. And let's see, that's Donna Shear hosting. She is the president and best-selling author of Dreamcatchers for Abused Children. She's the president, and she's the host. I'm the co-host for now, but we have a great lineup of hosts who are also regional directors. The Southern Regional Director for Dreamcatchers for Abused Children is going to be on there. The Western Regional Director for Dreamcatchers for Abused Children is going to be on there, as well as myself. We're going to have different shows, different times, so stay tuned for that, and I really hope you'll tune in. There's going to be some great information because these are some awesome, talented people who have brought their talents and gifts to Dreamcatchers for Abused Children, along with Sandra Dawn Potter, the CEO founder, who, had she not started this would not be, we would not be here today, trying to help stop child abuse. So I hope you will join us. Check out the website, actually you can get there by http dreamcatchersforabusedchildren.com. Probably if you type in www.dreamcatchersforabusedchildren.com, you'll get there too. They're also on Facebook, they're on LinkedIn, they're on MySpace, lots and lots of Dreamcatchers for Abused Children volunteers on MySpace. And we are out there to promote awareness, prevention, education, prevention of child abuse, and we are a 501c3 not-for-profit organization out there to try to stop child abuse. So I hope you will join us. And if you want to volunteer or you just want to help out by supporting Dreamcatchers for Abused Children, you can find all that information out on the website, and that's http dreamcatchersforabusedchildren.com. So we got a few minutes left, not even a few minutes, a few seconds. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm so happy that you could be here with me, and I just thank everyone for the support. I have lots of friends all around the world who tune in. I got people in Australia, friends in Australia, friends in the UK, friends in the United States and Canada and elsewhere, all around the world. Thank you so much for tuning in, and really I appreciate your friendship and your support. It just means everything. And I want you to all have a great night. Be safe. Stay safe online. And if you're a young person under the age of 18, stay safe online. Get the information. And we'll be talking to you again. I'll be back on tomorrow morning, one child abuse survivor to another. And that would be at 6 o'clock a.m. Mountain Standard Time. So thanks, everybody. Take care. Have a great night. Bye-bye.